How we doing, folks? Your host Moose here on the Pitt Panthers Football Network as we welcome you to your Season 5, Week 13 around the NCAA recap show. Your Pitt Panthers coming off a senior night victory at Heinz Field over the North Carolina Tar Heels. It's a dramatic come-from-behind effort, 31-28 the final. Pitt, of course, was trailing 28-17 and scored 2 touchdowns, including a game winner from Kenny Pickett, senior quarterback, in the fourth quarter to give the Panthers the dramatic come-from-behind victory that keeps them in the running for the college football playoff potentially and a potential national championship, which would be their first since 1976. It was a great performance from Pitt. Moved the ball very, very well. Saw plenty of guys make plays for them, which was good to see because their defense struggled today. 415 yards against 166 rushing yards, which is much more than we typically see. But we ended up with 500 total yards of offense ourselves. Kenny Pickett threw for 318 yards and a touchdown. No interceptions, which is great to see. We had no turnovers in this game at all, which was fantastic. We forced one, so we won the turnover battle in that regard. And we just saw a great game overall. C.J. London, 17 attempts for 112 yards, 2 touchdowns. Kenny Pickett added a rushing touchdown as well, but London went out with an injury on Pickett's touchdown in the fourth quarter. He went out, he took a hit, went out with a toe injury, and so Todd Sibley came in and helped finish things off. It was a great performance from Sibley to help run out the clock. Jay Keys, another great game for him, 8 receptions, 104 yards and a touchdown. KJ Welsh, huge day for him, 5 catches for 83 yards, which was great to see considering Benjamin Ogden's been out, was out with an injury. Welsh stepped up. Antonio Greer, the tight end, 3 catches for 35 yards. Caleb Cannon, another tight end. Baby Gronk had 2 catches. Onyango had a couple catches. Paul Lease, 3 catches. And the biggest thing for us today, look at the blocking. It's no wonder our rushing game finally had another great performance and one of our best of the season. 17 pancakes. Antonio Greer had 6, including a gigantic one on C.J. London's second rushing touchdown of the day. But Antonio Greer, 6 pancakes. We had 17 as a team, which is fantastic. Really, really solid performance there. Defensively, 3 sacks, including one for Wolfgang, which is great. That gets him up to 43 in his career, which means he is 1 away from the NCAA, or tying the NCAA record currently held by Terrell Suggs in this Dynasty universe. I know the real one is 45, but that player would have played in this universe, and he didn't set it in this universe. So that means Terrell Suggs still the leader in the clubhouse. Sean Wolfgang chasing him, looking for that NCAA immortality. Great game, though, for North Carolina, though. Surratt, really good job moving the football around. He passed well. Look how many different receivers he used that had big gains. Reed had one. Smith had a touchdown. Ton of different guys that had a nice game. Austin Richard was a tank for them running the football. He was incredible. I think he finished with 13 carries for like 120 yards. So he averaged almost 10 yards a carry, was very, very good. They were just a tough opponent. And I said that coming in. Their team rankings, I don't know why they've underachieved so much and they're 3-8 on the season, because their team rankings are fantastic. They actually have a better ranking than us. Our defense, I think, is barely ranked better than them, or was pretty close. Our offense was a little bit worse than theirs, but they were just really, really good. So it was a great game and one that was really fun to play, and I'm glad we came out with the victory. Virginia knocked off Miami, so even if we had lost, Pitt still would have clinched the ACC Coastal Division title regardless of that result. Clemson won on the other side, so they clinched the ACC Atlantic Division, not only because of that, but because of the fact that Louisville lost to NC State as well. Now, around the country, West Virginia goes to 6-1 in Big 12 play. They're the leaders in the clubhouse trying to win the Big 12 title, and if they win out, they've got a tough end of the year schedule. Maybe they end up winning the Big 12. And look at some interesting stats here. Al Dingle, the Oklahoma quarterback, the redshirt junior, was pulled from the game. 2 for 15 passing. Taylor Savage, the true freshman, came in. He threw a couple of interceptions, including a pick 6 at the end when they were trying to come back. But he had a nice performance, so it'll be interesting to see what Oklahoma does with their quarterback position going forward, and interesting to see if West Virginia can somehow squeak into the college football playoff. Houston stayed unbeaten with their victory over UCF. Penn State lost to Michigan State, so their second straight loss after losing to Ohio State last week. Clemson won. NC State knocked off Louisville, of course, in a big upset there. Bama stayed unbeaten with a victory over Texas A&M, 45-24. Cal goes to 11-1, beating Stanford, which means they're going to be in the Pac-12 championship game with a potential victory there and a chance to clinch a college football playoff berth. TCU loses their opportunity, likely to be in the playoff. If they'd have won out, it would set up an incredible showdown with West Virginia coming up this week as they take on, as they were upset by Baylor, pulled a big victory off there. Wisconsin ended up beating Northwestern, basically a de facto Big Ten West championship game. Wisconsin wins that, and so unless they lose their final game of their final conference game, they are likely to go to the Big Ten championship game against either Ohio State or Penn State, depending on what happens, because Ohio State looked to be a shoo-in for the Big 12 championship game, but they lose to Indiana, and so they're 6-2 in conference now. Incredible comeback there. Taysir Mack, actually Pitt Panther in real life, after transferring from Indiana, gets a touchdown pass from transfer quarterback Logan Byrd, who was North Carolina transferred to Indiana this year. He throws a touchdown pass to Taysir Mack. Indiana gets a come-from-behind victory over Ohio State, and that means that Ohio State has to beat Michigan in their final game because Penn State plays Indiana, and that could completely swing what happens in the Big Ten championship race. Over in the SEC, this is just a big game because of the teams, but LSU gets a 38-31 victory over Auburn. Colacolio finally with a big game, the true freshman starting, 261 yards passing, 3 touchdowns. Grant Grigsby with a great game rushing as well for the Tigers. They go to 6-5, get to bowl eligibility after, of course, winning the national title last year. Another big upset, though, Oregon. I mean, it's not a huge upset. They were in the Pac-12 title race for much of the year and won it last season, but Sam Miller, 3 touchdown passes and a touchdown run, knocking off number 6 Washington. That's another huge loss in the scheme of things because it's going to allow us to move up. Of course, we were number 7. You got number 4 TCU losing, number 6 Washington losing. So those are great things for your Pitt Panthers as we try to move into the national title picture and towards a college football playoff berth. And with those losses, it's actually making it so that depending on how the ACC championship goes, of course, we don't want to look past our game with Miami this week, but depending on how the ACC championship goes, even with a loss, if we lose close, we may have an opportunity to stay in the playoff picture. On the recruiting scale, of course, we do get another big commit. Chris Massey was visiting this week, the Norwich, Connecticut defensive end, and it's another big signing for us. We do miss out on Larry Irby, defensive tackle from Delaware. He's from Newcastle, Delaware. 3-star, decided to choose Boston College. We hadn't offered him a scholarship, and so he goes with BC. He's a decent player, 68 overall. Of course, he'd be a development prospect, but we do have Darren Toth graduating this year, so we could have used another defensive tackle just to add some depth. It won't be in the form of Larry Irby, but we do get Chris Massey. We're not fully scouted on him just yet, but he's 79 overall, 87 tackling, 82 hit power, 87 finesse moves. So he's got some very good skills, and he's another pipeline guy that we add from the Northeast. That's our 3rd defensive end from somewhere in the New England region. He's from Connecticut. Ronnie Baker and Malachi Bordeaux, both from Maine. So interesting to see how they both come out of there. NCAA Players of the Week this week, freshman outside linebacker Michael Bell, great game for Texas in their win over Iowa State. And then Clark Russell, the redshirt junior from Rice, in a victory over UTEP. 5 touchdowns. What a day that he had. And we end up winning an ACC Player of the Week honor. Defensive Scott Whaley had a sack and an interception, the victory over UNC. So great to see him get some honors. And Edwin Baker, huge game in that upset victory for NC State over Louisville that helps to keep their bowl hopes alive in a very tough season for a good NC State team. And the victory for NC State over Louisville causes Jawan Pass to fall back to 2nd in the projected Heisman race. Brennan Wooten, of course, losing with TCU to Baylor, falls back to 3rd. Artavis Pierce for Oregon State jumps back into the top spot in the Heisman race, while Victor Viramontes and De'Eric King, a couple of other quarterbacks, throwing their name into the hat. They're both going to play in conference championship games, so they may have an opportunity to jump ahead of some of the other players in this list, depending on how things go. And like we mentioned, Pitt up to number 4 in the country now because of the losses of some other teams, of course. We go from 7 all the way up to 4, leaping up 3 spots. Clemson goes up to number 3. Houston and Alabama still 1 and 2. South Carolina, though, doesn't even play, and they jump up to number 5 in the polls. Florida's up to 7 with their victory over Mizzou. Oklahoma, of course, we forgot, number 3 in the country, losing to West Virginia, falls back to 8. I don't know why they're ranked so highly Valley at 7-3, and a team like West Virginia that beat them at 9-1 is down at 13. But of course, with the fact that we're doing the college football playoff, we kind of mod the game to do that. The ratings are really just guidelines for us. They don't actually mean anything because we can make whatever 4 teams we want in the college football playoff. Oklahoma could be number 4 at 6-6, and they're not getting in the college football playoff, so we don't have to worry about that. But you can see how the rankings moved around a bit this week. TCU falls all the way back to number 17 with a huge loss there to Baylor, of course. You can see Ohio State completely dropped out of the polls with their loss to Indiana. Penn State fell all the way back to number 21 after losing to Michigan State and being at number 8. So some huge movement there. You can see, now we'll take a look at some of the conference races. The Coastal Division, or excuse me, the ACC conference as a whole is already settled. Clemson's won the Atlantic. Pitt's won the Coastal. That'll be the conference championship game. Big Ten completely up for grabs, though. Penn State and Ohio State both playing their final conference game this week. Wisconsin and Northwestern each playing their final conference game this week. So any of those teams could come out on top in that conference. In the Big 12, West Virginia is the leader in the clubhouse, but they do still have 2 big games with Oklahoma State and TCU to play. In the Pac-12, it's going to be Cal versus either USC or UCLA because those 2 teams still have 1 conference game left. It's against each other. The winner of that game will go to the Pac-12 championship game versus Cal. And in the SEC, it'll be Alabama versus South Carolina. South Carolina with the tiebreaker over Florida has won the SEC East. Alabama's won the West, and that'll be your SEC championship game. So we know a lot of the matchups already, but a few of them are definitely still up for grabs. As we look around the country this week in the ACC, it's rivalry week, of course. Georgia, Georgia Tech, Virginia, Virginia Tech, North Carolina, Duke, Florida State, Florida, Wake and NC State, Clemson and South Carolina, Syracuse and Boston College in a nice old Big East rivalry matchup. So this should be a great slate of games. It's going to be very entertaining to see what happens here. And in the top 25, there's some gigantic matchups. Houston with probably their last big test of the season. They only have 2 games left because the American, remember, lost a team. Connecticut went independent, which means the American does not have a conference championship game anymore. So Houston only has 2 games left to impress the College Football Playoff Committee. West Virginia, of course, is in the same boat. The Big 12 does not have a conference championship game, and so West Virginia has 2 games left against very good teams. Oklahoma State this week, TCU next week. They'll need 2 wins to potentially impress the voters to get into the College Football Playoff. Like I mentioned, UCLA takes on USC. The winner will go to the Pac-12 championship game, so that'll be a fun one to keep an eye on. Herb Street likes the Trojans, but I like UCLA. They've got an incredible offense. USC's been suspect defensively this year. I think that'll be a great matchup. Florida State versus Florida is always a fun rivalry showdown between those 2 Southeast schools. Florida State not had a great season, but they have a ton of talent, so we know how interesting that'll be. Penn State plays Indiana, of course, in one of the Big Ten championship deciding games. Alabama looking to finish off an undefeated regular season, taking on their rival Auburn in the Iron Bowl. Auburn's been very good with their rushing offense, but otherwise they've pretty much struggled this year. Their team maybe didn't have as much talent as people expected, but they were in the top 10 to start the year, and they've really struggled. I'd expect Alabama to win that one. And then this has got to be the game of the week. Clemson, South Carolina. South Carolina, if they win and then go to the SEC championship game and beat Alabama, they could sneak into the college football playoff with 2 losses. There's no doubt about that, especially because they'd give Clemson another loss. And then if Clemson were to beat Pitt in the ACC championship, 2-loss Clemson versus 2-loss South Carolina beat them, and that would likely put them in. So it's going to make things very, very interesting with how that game shakes out. Another huge one, of course, big rivalry game up in Oregon. Oregon State versus Oregon. The Ducks probably have the talent, but they've underachieved this season. Oregon State, is definitely overachieved this year. So in that Civil War matchup, we'll see if Artavis Pierce can solidify his claim for a Heisman and get a victory there. And then the final game that we'll cover, of course, your Pitt Panthers, number 4 in the country now, taking on Miami. And the thing with Miami is they're really, really good. The team that they have is spectacular. They underachieve every year, it feels like, except for season 2. You'll remember they made the ACC championship game and lost to Clemson there. But they've been so talented overall, and it's going to be no different this week. We take a look at our Pitt Panthers, of course. Jake Keys, 77 catches. Getting close to Larry Fitzgerald's season record of 92 receptions in a year. Kenny Pickett chasing after Rod Rutherford's yards total. It's like 36-64 or so for yards in a season. He's close to that. So some record chasing going on. Of course, Wolfgang, we talked about, is chasing the national record for sacks in a career as well. So we'd love to see some of those guys hit those marks. Jack Allison's Miami's quarterback, 27 touchdowns against 8 interceptions. He's good. Travis Homer still at Miami somehow. He hasn't declared over all these years. He's up to 106 yards per game. Very talented player there. And we just know how good they are. Injury report, Benjamin Ogden still will be out with a strained back. He's going to miss this game. He may even miss the ACC championship game. Hopefully he'll be healthy by then, but it remains to be seen. Miami, though, with the talent they have, they're missing a bunch of good, solid players. Cole Stover, outside linebackers, out with a broken tailbone. Gary McLeod's been out basically all season with a hip fracture. Chad Wright's out with a strained back for 3 more weeks. And then Chad Bailey, fantastic free safeties, missed basically the whole season with a torn hamstring. He'll be out as well. So a ton of different guys that Miami will be missing. But luckily for them, they have a lot of depth to fill in for those guys in most positions. You can see, you go down their roster, and they're just chock full of talent. Jack Allison, of course, the redshirt senior quarterback. His first year as a starter, he was stuck behind Malik Rozier and Evan Shariffs on the quarterback tree for Miami for quite some time. But in his 1 year as a starter, he's made good with it. 27 touchdowns, 8 ints. He doesn't really run very much, but he's a very, very good passer. Travis Bolden is their backup, the redshirt sophomore. He's going to be awesome for them next year. I'm really, really interested to play him. He's got a little bit better speed, so that should be fun. Travis Homer, of course, is the #1 running back for Miami. They'll probably lean on him. He's been very good this season, over 100 yards a game and 9 touchdowns. And their backups, Tavon Murphy, the true sophomore, very, very good player. He's averaging almost 50 yards a game, 5 yards a carry, a few touchdowns as well. He even had a better season last year when Homer was out with injury for a period of the season. So Tavon Murphy's a very, very good player as well, one that we'll have to watch out for. He's got good speed, and he'll likely be their starter next season. So it'll be a fun exercise to see if he gets any game time, to see what we can kind of scout for next year. But a good group of running backs that they have, and we know just Miami, so much talent around the field that you can't really key in on one guy because of how good they are overall. So it should be a great matchup there. Now, as we look around the rest of the Miami lineup, wide receiver, they're a little bit top-heavy. Derek Sisk, very good. Adrian Randall, a solid player. David Franklin, though, I think is the guy to watch out for. The redshirt sophomore is very quick, 94 speed. He'll be in the slot, which will make him tough to cover, especially if he's ever able to get us into a bad situation where we have a matchup problem, where he's against a linebacker or something like that. That'll be a tough game for us, taking on David Franklin. Also, Simpson as well. Very, very good player with some good speed that will likely have some mismatches we'll want to pay attention to if they try and get him open with his ability running around. They also have Giovanni Haskins, very, very good tight end, 43 catches on the season, very reliable. We know a lot of times teams like to take advantage of the tight end matchups against us, so that should be an interesting matchup. Kyle Mills as well, tight end. What's going to be interesting with Mills, I think he's actually going to be featuring a bit at lineman, because of the fact that they're missing like Gary McLeod at right guard. I think Mills is actually going to fill in some on the offensive line because of all the injuries they're currently dealing with. So that'll be interesting to see if we can take advantage of that and use it to our advantage. Patrick Bethel, very good left end. Solid player, 3.5 sacks on the season. They got some good depth there. Sam Walker's a nice player. They've also got Tyrone Harris, redshirt sophomore. Expect him to be back next year. 4 sacks on the season as well. Good, solid player. At DT, they're decent. You know, this is probably the one area on that Miami team where they're not stellar, is that front 4. They have one good player, of course, but the rest of the guys aren't great. Same with their their linebackers as well. They have Fontenot and Cook, who are solid players. They'll be missing Cole Stover due to injury, but they hang around in the 80s. Tim Crenshaw, though, beast. Redshirt junior, 91 overall. If he doesn't go pro, he's going to be one of the best linebackers in the entire country next year. He's got 86 speed, so he's very good in coverage as well. He's going to be tough. Robert Porter, not a ton of interceptions in his career, so I'm not necessarily worried about that. Trent Rivers is okay, but he doesn't have great speed. And then beyond that, we have some corners I think we can take advantage of. Cronin, Tommy Webb, Alvin Wallace. None of them are particularly impressive in terms of their actual abilities. Chad Bailey, of course, is going to be out due to injury, so we'll see the likes of Gary Scott potentially playing at free safety because of the fact that Bailey's been out most of the season. They also got Jermaine Brock, strong safety. He's a good player. Caleb Hadley. The thing with Miami is the injuries are ravaging them right now. With these guys they're missing due to injury, They're going to have to fill in with some guys who maybe aren't up to the standard of the starting caliber quality players that Miami has. So I think that's the one thing that helps us out is defensively. They're a little bit suspect. They're missing a few guys due to injury, and hopefully that should let us take advantage of them. So let me know in the comments, guys, what do you think of the big games? Is Pitt going to beat Miami? What will be the score? Can West Virginia potentially get in that Big 12 title race? Can they beat Oklahoma State? What's going to happen there? Does Bama stay unbeaten over Auburn, as well as any of the other big games? Oh, USC, UCLA, who wins that one? Let me know in the comments. As always, guys, thanks so much for watching. Hail to Pitt. See you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.